The Duke of Edinburgh remembered by those closest to him. His children speak of their loss and his legacy. After attending church in Windsor, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward said they were touched by the tributes and described the impact of the Duke's death on the Queen.
She described it as having left a huge void in her life.
It's been a bit of a shock. However much one tries to prepare oneself for something like this, it's still a dreadful shock.
And in a statement, Princess Anne said the Duke was her teacher, supporter and critic. We'll have more on the family's public responses and the preparations for the funeral. Also tonight, David Cameron breaks his silence over lobbying work, saying he should have contacted ministers through formal channels. One more day to this, at least outdoors, plus shopping and haircuts as England's lockdown eases. In India, the hospital's struggling amid an intense second wave of COVID. And?
No, I'm not homeless. I'm just houseless.
A story of life on the road in America. Nomadland is the big winner at the BAFTAs. Good evening. The Duke of Edinburgh has been remembered publicly today by some of those closest to him, with Princess Anne, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward speaking of what he meant to them. It follows yesterday's words from the Prince of Wales and a special service this morning in Canterbury Cathedral. Prince Andrew also spoke of the impact of the Duke's death on his mother, the Queen, and how she'd described it as leaving a huge void in her life. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
On a day of pause and reflection, prayers for the Duke were said in many church services. And after the service at the Chapel of All Saints in Windsor Great Park, members of his family spoke about him.
It's a great loss. I think the way I would put it is that we've lost almost the grandfather of the nation. And I feel very sorry and supportive of my mother, who's feeling it, I think, probably more than everybody else. She described it as having left a huge void in her life. But we, the family, the ones that are closer, are rallying round to make sure that we're there to support her.
The Earl and Countess of Wessex also spoke about how the Queen was dealing with the loss.
Thinking of others before herself. She's
as always,
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But bearing up. But again, you know, it's just that wave of affection for him, and just those lovely stories. They just mean so much, and you know, the tributes have been just fantastic, and that's really, really important, and we really do appreciate it. So,
and I think it's so lovely for so many people to learn about what he did, because I think quite a lot of things that have come out will have surprised some people.
The Countess spoke to members of the congregation about the manner of the Duke's death.
It was right for him.
Probably people wear masks if they want to.
It was so gentle.
She said his passing had been very, very peaceful, as if someone had taken him by the hand and off he went. At a special service of remembrance for the Duke in Canterbury Cathedral, the Archbishop spoke about loss.
We may pray and offer love for all who find that a great life leaves a very great gap.
Britain's former Prime Minister, Sir John Major, knew the Duke. He said his death would leave an enormous gap in the Queen's life.
I hope she will be given some time and space. I know she is the monarch. I know she has responsibilities, but she has earned the right to have a period of privacy in which to grieve with her family.
And Sir John said he hoped the Duke's funeral would give Princes William and Harry a chance to mend their differences.
The friction that we are told has arisen is a friction better ended as speedily as possible, and a shared emotion, a shared grief at the present time because of the death of their father, of their grandfather, I think is an ideal opportunity. I hope very much that it is possible to mend any rifts that may exist.
Outside Buckingham Palace, barriers have been erected around the pavements and signs have been put up to discourage people from leaving flowers. But despite the discouragement, bouquets and personal tributes are still being placed. This evening, one more family tribute, a written message from Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, describing her father as my teacher, my supporter and my critic. We will all miss him, she wrote, but he leaves a legacy which can inspire us all.
Nicholas Witchell, who is here now. Nick, take us through what the days ahead of the funeral on Saturday, hold.
One thing tonight, it is reported, though not confirmed, that Prince Harry has arrived back in the United Kingdom from California, without his wife, of course, and he will need to have, if he is to fulfil the full 5 days of COVID quarantine at home. Buckingham Palace, of course, insisting that everything will be fully COVID compliant. Other activity behind the scenes, there will be a lot of preparation and rehearsal, even though the ceremonial component is very small, but there are bearer parties from the Grenadier Guards and the Royal Marines who will be responsible for the movements of the coffin within the castle. So rehearsals, finalising the guest list, whittling it down to 30 guests. That won't be easy. And what in all of this of the Queen? Well, we've heard from the Wessexes that she is stoic and bearing up and thinking of others. The business of monarchy will continue. The red boxes will continue to go to Windsor Castle for her to work on. And although, of course, it is the case that the Duke's death cannot altogether have been a surprise, I was struck by the opening words in Princess Anne's statement this evening. She said, or she wrote, "You know it's going to happen, but you are never really ready." And how true that must be in the Queen's case. She now has rather less than 6 days to start to adapt and to prepare to appear at her husband's funeral.
Nick, thank you very much. The former Prime Minister David Cameron has this evening broken his silence over his lobbying work on behalf of the financial firm Greensill Capital. After weeks of criticism over contacting ministers about Greensill, he says he did not break any rules, but accepts he should have gone through only the most formal of channels. Our political correspondent Chris Mason joins us now from Westminster. What more has Mr Cameron said, Chris?
Well, for 3 weeks the headlines kept coming, and for 3 weeks David Cameron said nothing. That is until tonight, with a publication of a statement, a lengthy statement, 1,700 words, in which he effectively says he made a duff judgment. Let's take a step back here. Lobbying, trying to influence government, is entirely normal. Individuals do it, businesses, charities, trade unions. But how many people can text the Chancellor and get a reply? How many people can go for a private drink with the Health Secretary? David Cameron did. As you say, he didn't break any rules, but there's a bigger thing here. Did it pass the sniff test? And in this statement, Mr Cameron acknowledges, no, it didn't. Let's take a look at a couple of key sentences. He says, there are important lessons to be learnt. As a former Prime Minister, I accept that communications with government need to be done through only the most formal of channels, so there can be no room for misinterpretation. Labour say tonight he should come here to Parliament to answer questions from MPs. Those ministers who were lobbied face questions as well, although they say they've behaved entirely properly. And some people are making the argument that if these rules weren't broken, maybe it's the rules themselves that are broken and need fixing. One final point worth making. Journalism matters. The work of the Financial Times and the Sunday Times in ferreting out these awkward truths is what's brought us to this news tonight.
Chris, thank you very much. Chris Mason there. Thousands of businesses in England are preparing to reopen tomorrow in the next stage of easing the third national lockdown. They include shops, while pubs and restaurants will be able to serve outdoors. Hairdressers, beauty salons, gyms and outdoor attractions like zoos and theme parks can also reopen. Wales reopens retail tomorrow as well. Remaining pupils will return to school and restrictions on travelling across the border will ease. In Scotland, all pupils except those who are shielding will return to the classroom, and pupils in Northern Ireland will also go back to school. Here's our business correspondent Katie Austin on the changes in England.
The first lockdown pushed this lingerie and swimwear chain to the brink. Since then, they've ramped up online and closed some stores for good, but they still see Monday as hugely important.
We've had lots of calls from customers, which tells us that obviously lots of customers are wanting to come into shops, but we know that some will want to continue shopping from home for some time, and we're yet to find out exactly how much of that mix is a permanent shift.
We're going to stand back. Changing rooms can open, carefully managed, and bra fittings will be done, contact-free.
Our teams are using actually the fitting rooms opposite, so rather than actually joining them in the fitting room, they're doing exactly what they would normally do from further apart.
People are being encouraged to shop alone and stay socially distanced. Bravissimo is confident of opening safely, profitably, not sure. The British Retail Consortium says that non-food stores will have lost £30 billion worth of sales over the 3 lockdowns. It's also clear that the past year has sped up a change that was already underway towards there being fewer shops on our streets and people buying more online. But some things sell much better in person. After a slow winter, this bed retailer hopes to benefit from pent-up demand when it reopens 172 stores in England tomorrow.
All of our stores will have very clearly designated sanitising areas. Our products are, for the majority, requiring an assisted sales process where customers and the sales staff can touch and feel and lie on the products. And so being able to do that is an integral part of the sales process.
Pubs, restaurants and cafes in England can serve outside from tomorrow. Gusto will open 3 restaurants, including this one in Liverpool. They're fully booked, but it's not worth opening 9 others with small outdoor areas.
By the time we've got in a team of chefs, someone to wash the pots, a front of house team to make drinks and serve the food, and a manager to run the place, we would actually be worse off than we would be by staying closed.
Hairdressers are already open in Wales and Scotland. Tomorrow, England too. With social distancing, this salon will only have 50% capacity.
We opened up our online bookings quite a few weeks ago and we have been inundated. We're fully booked until the beginning of June, and we've also had our phone lines open. So yeah, we've got our clients banging the door down, can't wait for us to open.
Shops can open late to cope with an expected initial rush. After a painful year for retail, they're relying on customers to keep coming back. Katie Austin, BBC News.
Let's take a look now at the latest government figures on coronavirus. There were 1,730 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means an average of 2,629 new cases reported per day in the last week. 7 deaths were reported of people who died within 28 days of a positive test. On average, in the last week, there were 36 deaths per day. The total number of UK deaths is now 127,087. On vaccinations, 111,109 people were given their first vaccine dose in the last 24 hours. The overall number of people who've had their first jab is now more than 32 million, and 475,230 people have just had their second jab. That is the largest number of second doses given in a day, and it means more than 7.4 million people have had 2 doses of a COVID vaccine. Well, our health correspondent Anna Collinson is here. So, Anna, cases and deaths continuing to fall. How much confidence is there that that trend continues as restrictions ease?
Yeah, well, as we try to edge closer to normality by easing restrictions, infections are expected to rise. So, to protect the NHS, the government has put criteria in place, so a certain level has to be met before we can move on to the next stage. The first big test was the reopening of schools a month ago. And this week, government scientific advisors said there was nothing to suggest in the data that we can't now move to step 2, which is the reopening of non-essential shops and beer gardens. But some scientists say it is too soon. They're particularly concerned about some virus hotspots, particularly in parts of East Midlands and also in parts of Yorkshire. But the government would argue the UK is in a very strong position with more than 40 million, nearly 40 million vaccinations now administered. Now, tomorrow's easing is not viewed as particularly risky as long as people stick to the rules. But what's more of a concern is the possible easing of allowing indoor mixing and foreign travel next month. The fear is if things move too quickly, there could be a third wave.
Anna Collinson, thank you very much. In India, a second wave of COVID has reached a record level of new cases, with more than 150,000 registered in a single day. The state of Maharashtra, whose capital is the financial centre of Mumbai, is the worst affected, with some hospitals already overwhelmed. Our correspondent Yogita Limai reports from there.
A hospital in the western town of Bhavnagar. These are COVID patients and there are no doctors to treat them, says the man filming the video. In Pune city, people are being given oxygen outside a hospital because it's too full. Medical facilities are falling short during a fierce and rapid COVID surge. 73-year-old Mary Arokya Das was turned away from 6 hospitals. She died on her way to the 7th. Her son Anthony spoke to me from isolation. All these years she never needed to go to a hospital, and when she did, I failed her, he said. Field hospitals built last year are already full. This one in Pune is managed by Dr. Sangram Kapare, who's been on the front line since the pandemic began.
Right now what I'm seeing, a single member of the family gets positive, the entire family is positive. The virulence has gone up, the infectivity ratio has gone up. It is affecting young adults, which is quite surprising.
Deaths remain low compared to India's population, still to be conclusively explained. But hundreds are dying every day. The government says the flouting of COVID norms has caused the surge, but many argue that's not the main reason.
It cannot explain the kind of surge in cases that we are seeing now currently in India, which clearly suggests that there is a great role for highly infectious variants of the virus which are spreading faster.
In the midst of the crisis, dozens of vaccination centres in Mumbai and around are closed because of a lack of supplies.
India's health minister says there's no shortage of vaccines. This country has been mass producing them and over the past few months has exported tens of millions of doses. So people who've been turned away from centres like this one are asking where their doses are.
The worst hit areas are locked down, but surges are being seen across India. Despite that, mass gatherings are being held for political rallies and religious festivals. This country appears to have let its guard down. Yogita Limai, BBC News, India.
Now some golf, and the final round of the Masters is reaching its closing stages in Augusta, with Japan's Hideki Matsuyama in a commanding position. Our correspondent Andy Swiss has the latest.
The final day at Augusta, and this was the man to beat. Japan's Hideki Matsuyama began 4 shots clear, but as his opening drive sailed into the trees, his rivals set about ramping up the pressure. America's Will Zalatoris, playing in his first Masters, making an early move. Hopes of a British winner lay with Justin Rose, but despite flashes of brilliance, he still had plenty of work to do, especially as Matsuyama's early nerves began to disappear.
Oh, what a save.
The leader was looking composed, the others still playing catch-up. Spain's John Rahm put together one of the rounds of the day, while the unheralded Zalatoris continued to shine. Just 24, but showing a maturity beyond his years.
Very nice.
But Matsuyama was still the man they were all chasing. Japan has never had a Masters champion. Could this be their year? Andy Swiss, BBC News.
The annual BAFTA Film Awards ceremony has paid tribute to the Duke of Edinburgh, who became the organisation's first president in 1959. This year, because of the pandemic, winners delivered their acceptance speeches remotely. Our arts editor Will Gompertz was watching.
There was a sombre note to begin this year's BAFTAs as the Academy paid tribute to its first and greatly admired president.
Before we start, we're extremely saddened by the passing of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, on Friday. Now, the Duke was BAFTA's first ever president over 60 years ago and was the first royal patron, a line that goes through all the way to BAFTA's current president, his grandson, the Duke of Cambridge.
It was a largely virtual awards in which the nominees appeared on giant screens, while the celebrity presenters opened the golden envelopes in a virtually empty Royal Albert Hall. Nomadland was an early and fitting winner, a film about loss and loneliness, striking a chord in a year when the pandemic has left a lot of people bereft and isolated. The film was helmed by Chloe Zhao.
Can look
over your shoulder.
Who became only the second woman ever to be awarded the Best Director BAFTA.
We would like to dedicate this award to the nomadic community who so generously welcomed us into their lives.
Its star, Frances McDormand, won the Leading Actress Award as many expected, but she was unable to attend the event. Nor was Sir Anthony Hopkins, who won the Leading Actor BAFTA for his powerful portrayal of an elderly man with dementia in The Father.
Oh, I was a dancer.
Were you?
Yes.
Dad?
What?
You're an engineer.
What do you know about it? Yes, tap dancing was my specialty.
The winner of the Best Supporting Actress was
Ye Jung-yun for Minari.
Especially recognized by British people, known as very snobbish people, and they approve me as a good actor, so I'm very, very privileged and happy.
She won for her performance as the equally straight-talking grandmother in Minari.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation.
Daniel Kaluuya followed his Golden Globes win with the Best Supporting Actor BAFTA for playing Fred Hampton in Judas and the Black Messiah.
I'd like to thank Chairman Fred Jr. and Mama Kua for partnering up with us and joining hands to bring this man to the position that he belongs.
Emerald Fennell won for Outstanding British Film and Original Screenplay, ending the night with 2 BAFTAs to add to her personal collection.
I wanted to hold something, but I only had this chocolate BAFTA, which has melted in my hand because my palms are so sweaty.
Boogie Bakray, the teenager who plays the eponymous character in the British drama Rocks, appeared genuinely surprised to win the Rising Star category. The big winner, though, was Nomadland, which finished the night with 4 BAFTAs, including the prestigious Best Film Award. Will Gompertz, BBC News.
And a first look at tomorrow morning's newspapers is coming up on the BBC News channel. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news wherever you are. Good night.